Hello and welcome to week 3. This week you are to read chapters 8 through 12, and this week we get into the actual grant writing process. So here we go. Before jumping into writing, of course, we want to prepare to write. So chapter 8 talks about preparing to write. Before writing, it is important to prepare first before just jumping in. First, you want to develop a schedule for project implementation. Knowing the rough time schedule will help with many questions that will arise during the grant writing process. Next, provide a framework for project management that includes all the people that will be involved in the project and their roles and responsibilities. Getting those people involved in the grant writing process is key so that they have buy-in if you receive the grant and do implement the project. You will also need to anticipate the cost of the project to ensure that your budget is adequate and you ask for the appropriate funds. Next, make sure everyone in the organization knows about the grant and the plans of the proposed project. Lastly, make sure you have commitment from everyone who will be involved throughout the organization. If you don't have this commitment, it is best not to submit the proposal. There's a good checklist on page 82 that includes all that should be done during the preparation stage, so you can refer to that. A few more important steps include getting all the information that you will need about your organization, such as statistics, your Form 990, budgets, a list of board members. If your organization has written grant proposals in the past, you can often utilize some of the narrative or text from those proposals, so getting a hold of those can be helpful too. Next, make sure to schedule uninterrupted work time in large chunks. This is key. You have lots of other responsibilities, but make sure you set time aside for grant writing. Creating a schedule for yourself with 3 to 4 hour chunks of time can be helpful. Lastly, make sure you and your organization have registered with the appropriate online platforms to submit the grant. Do this in advance, as there can be issues that arise with technology. As a personal experience, I was working on a grant, and a week before it was due, we went to submit, and it said that our password had expired. The person who was the administrator on the account no longer worked at our organization, so we could not reset the password. Luckily, we had enough time to solve the issue. This is another reason why not to wait until last minute. First, you want to create a proposal writing timeline. Ideally, you will give yourself a year for the grant writing process. However, this is not always possible. For example, I was notified of a great grant opportunity 10 days before it was due, so I had to work on very short notice. This is not ideal, but sometimes happens. It can also be helpful to develop a case statement before writing the proposal. A case statement is an internal document that includes all of the important information regarding what you propose to do, what others are doing, and why your organization is suited to do the work. This is an internal document, but some of the text can be utilized in the grant proposal. Some grant writers find this helpful, while others see it as an unnecessary extra step. You will need to decide what works best for you and your organization. Next, you need to identify the components of the proposal. Each request for proposal, or RFP, which I'll use throughout the PowerPoints to stand for Request for Proposal, may be unique, but they often have similar components. For government funders, a list of common components is on page 87. For foundations, a list is on page 88, with more detailed checklist on 91 through 92 and pages 93 through 94, respectively. Most important, make sure you include everything the funder asks for, and don't include extra information or attachments that are not called for. Next, you will assemble your grant proposal writing team. It can be helpful, almost essential, to have a committee, since no one person has all the information needed for the grant proposal. Once you have a committee, get them together to brainstorm and begin working together. The next chapter is on the need statement. One of the first components of any grant proposal is the need section, also referred to as the statement of need statement, or problem statement, or opportunity statement. This is an extremely important part of the proposal. You need to be able to show that you have a thorough understanding of the problem, show how it is important to wider society, and that it is a need that could be addressed by your project. It should also be timely, something of interest and importance in your community right now. In this section, you will identify how the problem relates to other work in the community and how your innovative approach will help bring to this need. You will begin to provide a rationale for your methods and share your reasons for being passionate about the problem. Lastly, but importantly, you will need to show how the need aligns with the funder's goals. For example, if the funder is a foundation focused on foster care youth, you will need to relate the problem to their goal of serving foster care youth. The need statement is really where you build your case. To do this, you need to show the significance of the problem in the community. Why is this a problem? Why is this problem more significant and more urgent than others in the community? Next, make a strong case for how the problem is relevant to the funder's goals. It could be that this project will help the funder respond to a legislative mandate. For example, I worked on a project with the school district to provide healthy eating and exercise education to school children because the school district recently received a mandate that they had to provide these activities in order to receive funding for the school lunch program. Your project could also help the funder protect an investment that they've already made in the community, or the funder could help leverage support from other funders. Next, you will need to show that you have researched the problem and critically analyzed the issue. You need to show your competence and awareness of the problem and how your method to approach the problem has been researched well thought out. You also need to address the context in which your problem is situated, including the geographic scope, the participant profile, the methodology, how your organization's experience prepares you to meet this need, and the urgency or time frame of this problem. Next, you need to make sure that the project is feasible, and you should address how this project is able to meet the need in a manageable way. Last, you will need corroborating data, not just statistics, but also story narratives from your organization, and including charts and graphs instead of just all text can be helpful. Statistics should be from reputable sources and cited. The structure of a need statement can vary, but strong need statements answer these questions. What is the need? What are the causes of the problem? What are the costs of the problem? What are some of the promising strategies? And what are the major barriers? Pages 99 through 100 provide good examples of text that answer each of these questions. The need statement is pivotal and sets the stage for the rest of the proposal. There are several characteristics of strong need statements, including being concise, describing who and what is affected, including current, accurate statistics, using percentages and raw numbers, using charts and diagrams and quotes, documenting the need that is in the community, describing the scope, focusing on an identified target group, including realistic cost estimates, making a case for cooperation and showing who your partners will be, showing a need for replication that the project can be replicated in other areas, and explaining how your project fits with the funder's goals. You also want to correlate clearly the project or the need section should also correlate clearly with the project description and outcomes. Ask someone on your writing team to review the statement to be sure the case is strong and clear. A couple of pitfalls to avoid include not painting the picture of the problem as so bleak that it seems insurmountable. You want to be realistic, but not paint a doomsday picture. Second, don't just explain the problem as the absence of your project. Problems are much greater than any one program, and there are a variety of ways to address the problems, and you want to make it clear that you understand that. Lastly, don't attribute the need to your organization. One good way to do this is to avoid the phrase, "we need." Your organization doesn't need this, but rather the people you serve need this. The heart of the proposal, and usually the longest, is the project description. This usually follows the need section. It includes an introduction, the goals, objectives, and activities, the participants, the work plan, and the management of the project, which will be talked about in greater length over the next few chapters. The length can vary quite a bit, from a few paragraphs to over 20 pages. Be sure to abide by the guidelines. You also want to anticipate and acknowledge challenges in this section. In order to anticipate challenges, you might conduct field tests to test unproved methods or use sequential phases to assess and modify as you go along. You may want to schedule checkpoints along the way to check in to see how things are going, and also have periodic consultations with the funder to discuss potential changes. Now you can begin writing the project description. First, in your introduction, you will introduce your approach or methods, how it correlates to the need identified in the needs section, and mention your outcomes. You'll also want to highlight the unique aspects of your project design in the intro. In the next section, you will talk about your approach or strategy. You will want to share why it is significant and innovative, share the scope of the project, name the partners that will be collaborating with you. You'll also want to talk about any consultants or advisory boards that you'll have in the project, and describe how unexpected events will be handled. You want to make sure your plan is clear but flexible. Next, you'll describe the goals, objectives, and activities, and I think this is one of the most important parts of a grant proposal. The goal statement describes the overall intended results of the project. The objectives are specific and measurable results and use the SMART guidelines, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Then, the activity statement describes the specific tasks that will be conducted. It is the who, what, where, when, and how of your project. The goals, objectives, and activities can be described in a logic model, which I think is a really good way to explain this section. There are great examples on pages 108 and 109, and there's lots more examples by just doing a Google search of logic model templates. Next, you will describe the participants who will be served by your project. You will also include how they will be recruited for the project. Then you will develop a work plan and project timelines. Charts and graphs can be a great way to visually display this information, and there are examples of work plans and timelines on pages 111, 112, and 113. There are different types of work plans and logic models. Review the examples on pages 108 through 111. Depending on your project and the complexity, you will want to choose a model that works best to communicate your project to the funder. When developing a timeline, you want to consider how much time it will take to finalize the contract and receive money from the funder, the order of your activities and the time required for each activity, and the time between notification of the project and when you can be up and running. You also need to consider how much time it will take to set up internal processes at the organization and any downtime that the organization may experience due to holidays and vacations. You want to be realistic with your timeline. You don't want to promise to do too much and not be able to follow through. Also included in the project description are the deliverables. What will be the tangible products that will be created through this project? Not every grant will have deliverables, but if yours does, make sure you include that here. You will need to talk to the legal department at your organization to decide on copyrights or patents, and this information should be included in your proposal. Next, you'll need to address the potential for replication. Are there elements of your project that can be copied by other organizations? Are there any deliverables or products that could be used by others? Who else could benefit from the outcomes of this project? Funders like to use grant money to fund projects that will have a ripple effect, so consider how your project can do this. You will also want to discuss the dissemination of project findings and results. You will need to include a plan for dissemination, including some of the potential people that you will share your results with, which could be the participants, the board, donors, collaborators, academics, policymakers, and the broader community. You can disseminate this information in a variety of ways, including newsletters, annual reports, on your website, or through published articles and presentations at conferences. You will discuss the administration of the project by describing the key staff, their qualifications and responsibilities, the hierarchy of the organization and where this project fits, and the salary and benefits for each employee, which will be included in the budget. If you will need to hire staff for the project, describe your process for recruiting and hiring. One of the hardest parts of the project description is coming up with the sustainability plan. Funders want to know what will happen to the project once you are no longer receiving funding from them. You will need to share your plan. Some potential sustainable funding plans include inviting other funders to participate, seeking funding from a legislative body, contacting individual donors, absorbing project costs into your organizational budget, or using income from deliverables to pay for the cost of the project. Lastly, you'll want to describe how you will acknowledge the funders for their support of the project, which we'll talk more about next week. Depending on your type of project and type of grant, there may be different information that needs to be included in the project description. For example, with operating grants, you'll want to include how the funding will position your organization for growth, or how the funding will help the organization pursue innovative work that needs more testing. For capacity building grants, you'll want to include how this funding will help you increase your results, such as serving more individuals. For capital grants, you'll need to explain how the building or equipment will be used and how it is a means to a greater end. For example, if you're requesting a mobile mammography van, explain how this will increase the number of women who will be able to receive a mammogram and potentially catch breast cancer earlier. When doing a capital grant, make sure the costs are reasonable and reflect the costs of similar projects.